The purpose of this video is it's not an ideal setting here. I could have better lighting and imaging, and I hope to present a better presentation at a later time. But, rich, powerful, wealthy real estate owners, millionaires, they have fancy lawyers and they have, access to resources, and they can try to cover up their crimes and their real estate frauds. They can do all kinds of things, and they can be very convincing because they have money to buy people that are professional at brainwashing others and convincing the public that they haven't committed any crimes, when in fact the truth never changes. And this is exactly a story about that. There's a guy in Berkeley named Yehuda Ferris. He's lived in Berkeley since like 1980. Him and his wife came here as Hasidic missionaries from Chabad Berkeley Hasidic organization in Brooklyn, New York, and they've been here ever since. They're no longer the main liaison to the UC Berkeley students, but they never moved away. They stayed in Berkeley. They've lived in their $6 million, 7-bedroom mansion by the Claremont Hotel since 1980. And they continue to live here. And it's well known in the community that Miriam Ferris, Yehuda Ferris's wife, inherited an extremely large real estate empire, and she goes around talking about it to everybody that will listen, and so to all her children, that they buy up $1 million properties left and right. You can just glance online and put in a name of recent property purchases, and I found like $6 million in properties that the two of them bought in the last few years. It's, a big mansion upstate New York, Martha's Vineyard. There's like 6 houses in Berkeley they just recently purchased. Just so happens that my late brother's house is 2 blocks from this latest synagogue that they use for a synagogue, but the truth is nobody attends their services in 45 years in Berkeley. But my brother passed away from cancer 5 years ago, so he had a trust, and he left his half interest in his half interest in 1810 Grant Street in his trust. And my sisters and I were in our 60s. We're not financially established. We don't have stock portfolios, money, business. We're not independent billionaires. We didn't inherit a large real estate fund like a large real estate empire like Mrs. Ferris did. We're broke. We have nothing. Our mother's house was lost in the Oakland Hills, and we got swindled out of the property in the 90s in her passing away a few years after the fire. We were never able to rebuild. My father lived in New York, and he had an apartment in Seward Park housing project. It's kind of like a condo, but he was 84 and didn't have any fancy trusts, so the government had a $500,000 lien on the property, ended up taking $250,000, and to sell the property, the housing project took 18%, so there was a little money, but there wasn't much. It was, how it went. And then so now, 30 years after our mother passed away, we've been completely ripped off, disinherited, disenfranchised from our brother's trust. But by who? The rabbi that claims to be my brother's best friend, that my brother worked for like a dog for 30 years. My brother worked with his hands and built houses and properties and refurbished probably 25% of the houses in Berkeley. He's an unknown Carl Cardell. But in the winter months, he would work inside. Typically, Mr. and Mrs. Ferris would, on occasion, find him some work, and he attended their services. And then he got cancer and was told he had 6 months to live, but he lived 6 years because I worked very closely with them as a first responder younger brother those 6 years. And what ended up happening was he broke up with his Filipino girlfriend. They lived together, never married, 35 years at 1810 Grant Street, had 2 daughters. Suddenly, he split, left the house for 5 years. The daughters were in constant contact with him. I'd see him around town going to have dinner, whatever. He was in contact with his own daughters. He just wasn't living with the mother. But no sooner did he get incurable terminal cancer The daughters never showed up again. They never spoke to him till he never saw or heard from them the whole time before he died. And that's the truth. And they confessed in court. And I have the transcript of it. I don't know if I'll be able to read it in this. I'm already 5 minutes into this one. This is the introduction to the story. So what happened next was Yehuda Ferris sold my brother's half of this $2 million house for $82,000. And 5 years later, I got nothing. And my sisters got nothing. My sisters are in their 60s. They are dirt poor. They don't have husbands, let alone breadwinning husbands. They don't have livelihoods, college educations, marketable skills. They have nothing. And my brother told me every day for 6 years that he's leaving a percentage of his ownership of the house to the daughters. And here it is 5 years later. And what did the trustee do? Sold the property for $82,000. I had to leave the house, and he was trying to kill me by forcing an eviction in the middle of the pandemic. He wanted me to vacate the property and go live in the street in the middle of 2022, which the eviction moratorium didn't even end till like November of 23, let alone the threat of COVID. You know, to this day, people are dying of COVID. It's just not as dangerous as it was. But if I had left on his orders, without any money, without any check, without anything, I probably would have died of COVID in the street. And that was his wish. He said, I believe that he tried to kill me by forcing me out of the property in the middle of the pandemic so that I would be exposed to COVID and die. That was his plan. It didn't happen. And my brother's daughters killed him because they didn't see him in 6 years of cancer. Ask any oncology doctor, any cancer doctor in the whole world. You say, well, what if you had a guy who's like 60 and suddenly he's got aggressive terminal cancer, and his daughters won't even talk to him the whole 6 years. They won't even call him, they won't even visit, but he raised them from childhood. Did that contribute to their death? They're all going to say yes. Everybody knows this, right? So what did Yehuda Ferris do? Sold the property for $82,000, tried to evict me, and now 5 years later, I haven't received a penny, and neither have my sisters. And he tries to cover this up in legalese and legal language, and he tries to fabricate some story that he didn't do it. You know, that's like Hamas saying they didn't commit October 7th. Everybody knows they did, okay? So now that it's 8 minutes into my video, I want to start my presentation. Okay, here we go. Here's a copy of my brother's trust, right? It's dated August 26, 2019. This wasn't even the first trust. I found the first trust in the house that he wrote a year before he died that gave my sisters and I a quarter of his half of a $2 million house. That's $250,000 to split 3 ways. But they didn't, but then he passed away, and they gave us this trust that I'm about to read you from. And the law says they're supposed to tell you if a person changes their trust. But they didn't. I found the trust in the house later. And this trust right here was written after my brother was hospitalized 80 days with the liver coma. He was in the hospital 4 times in a row, on average about 3 weeks at a time in Berkeley. And I was at the hospital 24/7. I used to work there for decades. He was in a liver coma, unconscious, laying on the bed. And then he'd miraculously come back temporarily, but we had to give him this medication 8 times a day starting at 4 in the morning. And if anything slipped on that medication, or he didn't go to the bathroom enough, then he'd slip right back into a coma. But according to the thieves, I called Yehuda Ferris a thief, and his attorney, W.Rogers, is another thief out of Petaluma. No employees, 30 years, no website, 30 years, but he claims to be a lawyer. Very common name, but his license number is only one. It's 154219. So what happened? They come up with this trust, and they didn't even follow this trust. This trust says, give us $30,000 each plus 10% interest a year, and if we don't get it immediately in 9 months, it shall become an interest-bearing lien on the property until paid in full. They didn't do any of that. They sold the property for $80,000, and we haven't gotten anything. This is theft, okay? Absolute theft. And they go around saying, well, we sold it to the daughters, but the daughters aren't supposed to get it. And that's what I'm trying to explain here, that my brother was really mad that he didn't see his daughters in 6 years, and it caused him to die, and he knew it, and we knew it, and every doctor on earth knows it. And you couldn't find one doctor on this planet, I guarantee you, who will say that the absence of his daughters in the 6 years between 6 months to live diagnosis and his death 6 years later, that the absence of the daughters didn't contribute to his death. It did. It did. Everybody knows this. I mean, when the sun comes up, the sky gets bright. The sun contributes to the brightness of the sky. Nobody's going to argue that. No medical person is going to argue that the absence of daughters in a terminal cancer diagnosis in a 60-year-old patient, no one's going to argue that had nothing to do with his death. Yeah, he has no feelings. He raised his daughters for 6 years. They never called him once in 6 years. And no, that had nothing to do with his death. Are you crazy? Anyone that says that has to be committed to a mental hospital. I'm serious. Okay? So, getting back to what I'm saying, I want to get down to the facts here. Okay? They contributed to his death, and then they pretended to sell the property to them. But I get a text message from the trustee's wife, who owns tons of real estate. I wish I could show it to you in this video. I just don't have it right now. It says, we didn't really sell the house, but if we can get you evicted, we're going to put it on the market and make some money. But if you go on welfare, you won't be in the street, because welfare will give you a free place to live. I mean, the arrogance of some people is just amazing. Anyway, now we're in the 12th minute. This is an extremely long video, but okay, this is not how I intended to. I didn't intend to take so long. I'll try to make a brief one. Okay, the trust, this is dated August 20. This is admitted in the probate court, case number RP 221-20163. I'm not making this up. You can find this in the Alameda County Superior Court web domain if you look up case number RP 221-20163 in the probate division. It's all there. It's public record. Okay, you can look at it online. Okay, so it's in the Register of Actions. You'll find this document amongst a whole bunch of other things. Okay, so it says here, I'm not going to read the whole thing, I'm just going to leaf through it. 2019 trust. The trust agreement is entered into on August 26, 2019. Now, who's the trustee? Mr. Ferris, Yehuda Ferris of Chabad of the East Bay of 40 years, right? So here it says, this is the trust, and then I'm just going to skimp over because we'll be here for 3 hours. Okay, so then it goes on. It's got Article 4. Uh-oh, you don't see my arm. Okay, so now let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. Okay, so I'm reading this. It says, upon the death of the settler, that would be my brother, the settler, outstanding debts, trust of death, however, subject to Section B, paragraph of this article. Okay, so right here it's underlined, right? It says, and this is what the attorney who wrote the trust pointed out to me. He said to me, before he stole the property and pocketed $60,000 and never gave me a dime, he said, I deliberately wrote the trust so that it would confuse your brother's ex-girlfriend, the mother of his children, because she wanted the whole house to go to the daughters, but he didn't. So I wrote it in a way that she wouldn't understand it. And so here it says here, distribution of a portion of the trust estate is subject to settlement agreement. Okay, now I'm going to read from that settlement agreement. So it says here, the majority portion. Now, what is the majority portion? Listen carefully, folks. Settler gives 50.1% of his interest in 1810 grant to two daughters that never saw him in 6 years of cancer. They confess as much in court, but that's for another video. So here it is. He says, I'm giving 50.1% of my half. Now, that's not his whole half. He owns 100% of half, and he says I'm giving 50.1%. There's still 49.9% left. So it says he gives it to the two daughters to be divided equally between them. So that's, and then above it, it says the majority portion of the settler's interest in the property, which that's the majority portion, it goes to them, The majority portion is subject to a certain settlement agreement between the settler, the man who died, the cancer patient, and his girlfriend, relating to a California Superior Court Alameda County case number, RG, 891, whatever that case number is, Ziprin versus Salgado. The terms of this Section B are intended to comply with that settlement agreement. So what's intended to comply with that settlement agreement? That the daughters get 50.1%. Well, let's fast forward here. Okay, just bear with me. We're going to go down to the settlement agreement. Now, here's the settlement agreement. This is also in the court. I'm not making this up, right? So, first page. Okay, so here's the critical thing. This is on page 2, right? This is the same attorney who ripped us off and got $60,000, made himself a beneficiary in the trust, which is illegal. It's legal malpractice. That's his middle name. William John Rogers' middle name is legal malpractice, by the way. Don't ever hire him. It says here, Salgado, that's girlfriend. Okay, no, this is it. Okay. Give me a second here. Okay, here we go. I'm bouncing around here. Okay. This is a boring video. Salgado warrants that she will have prepared and executed a will or a trust in which she leaves her 50% ownership of the property to the party's 2 daughters, right? They're the ones that never saw the dad in 6 years, right? In equal shares with the reservation, okay, that if she dies, he gets to live there, right? Okay, and then here's the key thing. Now, as I pointed out a moment ago, visually showing you the paragraph in the trust as well as verbally, that my brother said the majority portion of the trust is dependent on a certain settlement agreement. And that portion, the majority portion, is that he gives half of the $2 million house at 1810 Grand Street to his 2 daughters who never saw him, and they confess as much. And they're rich. But they didn't take 1 second out of their life in 6 years to see their father as he wasted away from cancer. I mean, that is sadistic torture. That makes concentration camp guards look like saints. Okay, so it says here, Ziprin warrants to Salgado that he will have prepared and executed a will or trust which leaves a majority, this is a key word, a majority of his 50% ownership in the property to his 2 daughters. That's a majority. Now, look at the difference. She warrants that she leaves her 50% ownership of the property to the party's 2 daughters. Her 50% goes to the daughters. Her entire 50% of the whole property goes to the daughters. But in sharp contrast, Ziprin warrants to Salgado that he will have prepared and executed a trust which leaves, listen carefully, a majority of his 50% ownership in the property to his 2 daughters. A majority. That doesn't mean everything. Well, let's go back to the trust. Okay, because this is in sync with the trust, right? It says here, he gives 50.1% of his interest in Grant Street to the 2 daughters listen carefully, from the remaining balance of the trust estate, including the remaining 49.9% of the okay, say it down here, down here, look, including the remaining 49.9% of settlers' interest in 1810 Grand Street, Berkeley, 94703, and all his money. The trustee, that's Yehuda Ferris, right, who lives in a $6 million mansion, and his wife owns about $50 million in real estate, $30,000 to each of the following persons, by heirs and by right of representation: sister, and brother. And then $20,000 to somebody else, $40,000 to Ferris himself. So right when the man is dying of cancer, he's already been hospitalized 100 days in a liver coma, over 4 hospitalizations. He could barely stand or walk. I know, I worked with him 24/7 the last year. I was his caregiver. I have some medical certifications. So he could barely stand up. He could barely talk. Wasn't allowed to drive. He didn't work but 20 minutes a day and pretended to work, but he really couldn't even stand up. So while he's on his last legs, this parasite, William John Rogers, out of Petaluma, license number 219154, says 40,000 to Ferris, which shall be used to pay for his burial expenses and to pay the debt, if any, to the settler's attorney, William J. Rogers. He made himself a beneficiary. When you write a trust, you're not allowed to be a beneficiary, but he did it anyway. And then it says any remaining balance of 40,000 used by Yehuda Ferris, whatever he wants. Okay? Now, let's go back to a year before the COVID pandemic it lightened up a little bit. Okay?